Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you today. I got a question for you. How would you like a spiritual practice that you can take any place with you, you have instant feedback from, and it lets you know that you're on the right path? Anybody? Okay. Well, that spiritual practice, Ernest Holmes alluded to in that quote. He says, analyze yourself. It's self-inspection. And the reason why this is so valuable as a spiritual practice is because when we take something and we analyze it, we can see. We become able to make choices in our lives. Now, we have three areas that we're going to kind of talk about today, and at first they may seem very, very separate. Desire, opinion, and what's the last one? Revelation. To me, they seem really separate too, but they aren't. They aren't really that separate. In desires, we have two sources of inspiration for desires. And there's nothing wrong with desire, however it comes, because desire is really God speaking to us saying, you can be more, you can have more, you can do more than you're doing at the present moment. So the desires come up. But there's two main sources, as I said. One is spirit, which gives us ideas and the other is man. And we know when we are seeing desires from man, because what happens is we find ourselves in a limited experience. And what do I mean by limited experience? Well, when Spirit gives an inspiration, it is expansive. It keeps moving, it keeps growing, it keeps changing. And it does that throughout the universe, so it doesn't stop any place. When you get a desire from man or human, quite often it's just that. You know, for instance, if you want a new house and you're focused on getting a new house, well, you get the new house and the desire then either becomes, I want a bigger house, want more, better, different, or it's just satisfied right there. Now, when it's inspired by God, that new house gives you something more than just the house. And this is where our mental equivalence comes in, and you can hear more about this in classes, is where do we come up with mental equivalence? Mental equivalence is spirit being involved. Now, I heard once that what we're trying to do, all of us, is bring the infinite, which is spirit, down into the finite, which is our daily living. So we're bringing that infinite understanding, that infinite joy and peace and love into our daily lives. And this spiritual practice allows us to do that, because what it does is for anything that we find that's limiting us, that is exclusive, that is different, we can expand that. We can bring spirit down into it to change it, to make it a spirit desire instead of a man desire. How do we do this? Well, we do it through mental equivalence. Mental equivalence is, for instance, you want a house, and the house, you look at what does the house give you? What would the house give you? For one person, it might be room to move because you've got a family and you have companions and everything. Another person, it might be security, safety. For another person, it might be just peace of having some place that's yours, that's joyful. Now, all those things I mentioned are spirit-oriented. Love, joy, peace, security. That's spirit. When most of us go to look for a house, we want 4 bedrooms, we want a certain location, we want this, and we don't think too much about the spiritual aspect. But with self-analyzing, we can look at this and go, well, do I want this, just the object, or do I want the spiritual representative of that object? Because when you bring spirit into it, it's going to affect your whole life. It isn't going to stop with just the object. It isn't going to stop with just the new car, which very quickly becomes old, and then you want another new car. It's going to be expanding into your whole life so that if you want more joy through your home or through your car or whatever, then you're going to find that joy coming up in every area. You open up to spirit, and that's really important. And the way you can tell, that you can really tell, is spirit is life-giving. What do I mean by that? When you involve spirit, it spreads out. It brings more life into understanding. Brings more life into what you're doing. Are you still hearing me? No? Well, I guess we're going to use the mic. For some reason, we're having trouble with this little mic. So, I don't really like standing behind a podium, but that's the way it goes. So, you bring more life into whatever you're doing. You bring more life into community. You bring more life every place. When it's just the desire that you might say is human desire, it tends to be life-taking. Now, what do I mean by life-taking? Taking from life means you're just getting that object. It's just taking something. It isn't expanding anything. The other part of from God that you can really look at to help analyze where you are is inclusive or exclusive? Being something from spirit, it's going to be inclusive, meaning that you're going to find out that what you want allows you to bring more people into your circle. It allows you to open to new ideas. It allows you to just include more than you've included before. When we're just looking at objects and trying to get objects, what happens is it becomes exclusive. It's for your use. It's just mine, or maybe a small group, home for family. But it doesn't involve more than that. And so when we look at this, we can say, do we want to be exclusive or do we want to be inclusive? And understand there's nothing wrong with wanting objects, because sometimes we need them, and that you just want to know where you're coming from on this. Are you just trying to get things to fill a vacancy, a hole in yourself? Or do you want to bring spirit into this understanding, into this reality? Now, when we talk about opinions, which seems, well, that's really different, there's 2 ways of looking at this also. And I got a little story, and this is, opinions can come from having experiences that allow you to make opinions, or you can get opinions from other people. For instance, most of us grow up and we have the opinions that our parents had about things. It takes us really looking to break away from those, to say, well, this isn't the way it has to be. But it takes looking at that. Sometimes we gain opinions from books, from our teachers, from other people that we associate with, and so forth. And usually those are all from facts, doing with facts and perceptions. Now, the other place opinions come in is experiential. And as I said, I've got a little story about this. When Wendy, since she isn't here, when Wendy was a very little girl, she was about 2 years old, we were going over to Germany And in order to go over into Germany, we had to get typhoid shots and an array of other shots before we left because it was military, and they said, you have to do this first. So we were sitting in the waiting room, and my daughter saw this black man with a mustache, and she walks up to him and said something about men with mustaches always smoke. Now, I have no idea where she got this. It wasn't something I ever said to her, but she, in her own little experience, had always been around people that smoked and had mustaches. So she put the two together and that was her opinion. And you don't think of somebody being 2 years old starting something like this. And she was always very perceptive, but we can get these opinions starting from when we're very young, and they may or they may not be true. In this case, it wasn't the truth, and I was thoroughly embarrassed. But another way of looking at things is no matter where we gain our opinions, it's always good to be open, because somebody else's opinion might have as much value, or we might say, wow, that is really insightful. Maybe I should change my opinion that I've had. But when you're really stuck in an opinion, when you really, you've met people that it's their opinion, this is the way they're going to do it, and they don't want to hear anything else. They shut themselves off. They shut themselves off to growth. They shut themselves off to spirit. They shut themselves off to other people. So it's important to keep yourself open to different opinions. And here is a place that I wanted to mention was, we just had that Florida shootings with the school children and that. And we can look at that and make the opinion, which a lot of people do, these poor victims. These children are poor victims, and, this isn't right, there should be gun laws and everything else. Now, I'm not just saying that there shouldn't be, but I'm saying that there's another way of looking at this. What if we take it from a spiritual attitude? We know that when there's certain events in the world that people, when you're in the spiritual realm, come together to help create that event so that we as the world, as the people in the world, can learn and grow and maybe change whatever is going on. Now, in a case like that, if you think of those children as all being, having at one point made the spiritual agreement to come together in this, then you've got to call them something other than victims. In my mind, they become heroes, those children. Now, which way would you rather think about it? Do you want to think of them as victims, as being just there and having bad luck? Or do you want to think of them as maybe being heroes, allowing the society to change how it's doing things? I prefer to call them heroes. I prefer to think of them as something a little higher than victims, because I don't think they were totally not there for, just totally an accident. So it's perception. A lot of opinion is perception, how you look at something. Is a stoplight stopping you when you're on your way to work bad, or is it good? It just is. Now, another area that we're looking at is revelations. And most people think, wow, that aha moment, that great revelations is wonderful. And it certainly is. But we can have revelations that aren't so wonderful. If you've ever been part of a cult, or you've heard of a cult, you know that what they do is they take away, they diminish life rather than expanding life. They tend to be exclusive rather than inclusive. They tend to be finite instead of infinite. They tend to take away from from life because they're full of fears and doubts and worries instead of being life-supporting. And this is important. This allows you to make a choice. Again, you won't be caught up in any sort of cults or anything like that if you do this analysis and you allow yourself to see these differences. And as I said, it's really easy. And the more you do this, the easier it gets. And so you won't be caught up in these experiences that you'd rather not be caught up in. And not only that, but we got to remember that, I want to move around. we need to remember that also people have revelations. They tend to make them into stories. They tend to try to grow them. For instance, did you know that at the time of Jesus' birth, that there was a lot of, there was a way of dealing with something like that. And because they wanted Jesus to be important, they gave him an immaculate birth. Now, this doesn't mean that it actually happened that way, but if you look at Buddha, he had a special birth. If you look at any of the great people, they tried to make him set apart from regular humans by having this something special. And so they have this, allow this story to develop. And we know that the Bible was written many, many years after Jesus passed, like 200 years before the first story was actually written down, which is really interesting. So you can imagine how things kind of got changed and evolved and maneuvered. That's not to say the Bible doesn't have wonderful things to it, and it shouldn't be praised as a book with fantastic ideas any more than anybody else. So what we need to do is, I feel really awkward standing in one place. So what we need to do is use this spiritual practice on a daily basis. And as I said, the more that you use it, the more you will find that it changes your life. This analysis of, am I coming at this from strictly a human viewpoint, or am I coming to this, whatever it is, from a spiritual standpoint? And I think everybody here wants to explore the spiritual standpoint, wants to allow themselves to grow spiritually. And this helps that growth take place, because every time you bring that infinite into the finite, every time you make a choice, you choose to stay more open, you choose to allow yourself to make a choice from the spiritual standpoint, you grow. And not only do you grow, but you allow the people around you to grow. You allow the community you're in to grow. And that's fantastic. That is something we all want to do. And since this gives you immediate guidance, because you can see immediately, well, which do I want? Which way do I want to go here? You have that immediate guidance to take you on your way. And you have a choice. As always, you have a choice. And in this world, we need those choices. We need to expand. So, if you join me, we'll do a spiritual mind treatment to bring this into our lives, into the depth of who we are. So I know right now that there is only spirit. Spirit is love, joy, peace, beauty, all those things that are good, and it is nothing else. It is the in and the out, the up and the down. It is inclusive. It doesn't exclude anything. And I know for myself and for each person here that this idea of analyzing ourselves, of allowing ourselves to think the pros and the cons, and is it spirit or is it man? Is it experiential or is it just habit of what my parents thought and people before them, or what a book thought? I start thinking for myself on a deep level. I involve spirit in all that I am. I allow spirit to be my guide every moment, because I engage in this analysis, in this understanding that there is always choice, that there is always the path before me. And it allows growth to take place deep within me, a growth that lets me see the truth beyond what I thought, lets me change my opinions, lets me be free. It gives me freedom, freedom to truly be who I am supposed to be. And that's a spiritual being walking in this world. Not part of this world, but certainly involved in it. Seeing the highest and best in all people, seeing the highest and best in all situations, allows me to experience the highest and best in my life. And for that, I am so very grateful. For I know that this truth is my truth, and it is the truth of each person here who chooses it. It is the truth of being. I give thanks. I am at peace with this understanding. And together we say, and so it is.